Hey everybody, it's Safi and Marco Dish Out on Movies, the only movie review show on YouTube to review movies in terms of food. It's just Marco here once again, and I am here today to review Nosferatu 2024. This is the third interpretation of the Nosferatu story, which is an interpretation of Dracula. And well, for starters, I should say like what I thought about the other versions, because that will help sort of inform my opinion on this movie, and then also all the other Draculas in general. So I really liked the silent version. I thought that it was insanely creepy and scary. And, as a kid, I was scared shitless by that movie. In fact, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would be too scared to walk around like the upstairs, because it was so like because I looked downstairs and I would peek downstairs and it would be completely pitch black downstairs. And I would wonder, like, is Nosferatu standing there, like, in the darkness, just waiting to come out? Like, the creepy part where he's standing in the doorway. Like, that's what I would picture. And so I was really, really scared of that movie. And I really thought that the way that they did it, it was perfect, because it felt real. It felt like... It didn't even feel like it was a movie. It felt like they just put a camera in different parts of the world at that time and then showed the story of this real thing that happened. Like, it didn't even feel to me like a movie. And then I did see the Werner Herzog version in, I think, like 2018 or no, I think like 2020. Yeah. And I actually kind of liked a lot of that movie. I thought that Nosferatu as a character, Count Orlock, his character was really good in that movie because he had a lot of presence. He had a lot of screen time, and you got to really get to know him in terms of, like, he was a well-rounded character, and that's been a big issue for me with other Draculas, is that there's just this little tiny hint of a character, and then for the rest of the story, it's just, oh, he's a monster, he's a vampire, he just goes around eating people. That's why I really like Fright Night. And Fright Night is my favorite movie ever made, because, the vampire in that movie, he's a character. He's a fully developed character, and he's the perfect villain. He's awesome, and so, in terms of the Draculas, or I should actually finish first up. There's so many Draculas and versions to talk about. But the Werner Herzog one, the one thing that I really hated about it was the ending. It ended on a really stupid ending, and it was just really disappointing to me. I didn't like it at all, and that kind of ruined the movie for me as a whole. Otherwise, I actually thought it was kind of an improvement on the silent version in terms of being an overall movie. Then, in terms of all the Draculas, I love Bela Lugosi, obviously, and I think that the thing that I love about his Dracula the most is that he talks. He's not just silent through the whole movie. He's not, like, creepy and decrepit. He's creepy, but he's got a character. He's got a voice. He's got a authority with his voice, and he actually talks to characters in a way to where you really fear him and you're afraid of him. Whereas the Nosferatu and the Werner Herzog version, he's really weak and gross and just kind of like, ugh. So, like, I love Bela Lugosi's version and then the Werner Herzog one, because they prove that to be a scary villain, you can talk. Because that's been a big thing with a lot of villains, like, Michael Myers. Oh, Michael Myers can't speak. He should never speak. Even if he says the word no, it's too much. And it's like, no, fuck off. Like, I understand it's a different character, but it's like you have these certain horror characters, and it's like for some reason people think that if a horror character talks, it automatically makes them bad. And then Christopher Lee, he is actually my favorite Dracula, ironically, or not really my favorite himself, but his movies at least are my favorite, like, interpretation of Dracula. And he just decided not to talk at all, basically, until a lot of the later movies. He would just show up on screen and kill people and do whatever the fuck he wanted and maybe hiss a little bit, and then, Peter Cushing would have to come in and go up against him, like that's what he did in those movies. And I love all those movies. I could watch them at any time, although I do think that the major flaw is how little he talks. And that's because he refused to say the lines that they wrote for him, and he thought that they were just not good enough for his standards, which is ironic because he was in all those Dracula movies, and some of them were worse than others, if you know what I mean. And then I really hate Bram Stoker's Dracula. People who've seen this channel, they know how much I hate that movie. I just despise everything about it. I think it's absolutely like one of the worst horror movies I've ever seen. And I actually watched the full movie this year for the first time, and my opinion of it just lowered even more from watching it. I hated it. So going into this new Nosferatu, I was kind of like excited, honestly, because I thought, it has a great cast. And the director, writer, Robert Eggers, I liked The Witch quite a bit. I wouldn't say that it's really rewatchable, but I really enjoyed it. And then The Lighthouse I did not like, though. But I really felt like it was an interesting choice for him to make this movie, because he's all about telling original stories, and he really likes folklore and mythology and just gothic stuff. And so I really thought that maybe he could do something special with the story, the Nosferatu story. However, the movie starts and you get a couple of hints at what could have been like a really good Nosferatu movie. And because there are these little tiny ideas that they explore, or actually that they don't explore, that are kind of like, ooh, what if these were actually the whole movie instead of like the same old story we've already seen before. So one of those things is the guy who sends Jonathan, aka Thomas, to see Count Orlock, and this is all going to be spoilers, by the way. He is actually the Renfield character in this movie. And I thought that was a great idea. I don't remember that being in the other two versions. And I thought that was a really interesting idea, because they showed him doing like an occult ritual, and that's another thing about Robert Eggers, is that he loves the occult and he loves that kind of thing, which is cool because you don't see that a lot in movies nowadays, you don't see like a lot of like exploration into those types of topics unless they're like really, really cheap indie movies. I did watch one back in like, I think 2022 or something, and it was like a British or Scottish indie movie or something. But other than that, like, I don't really see that in like mainstream Hollywood, and so it's really cool to see that. And then Jonathan, aka Thomas, when he travels to meet Count Orlock, first off, he stays in this village with all these gypsies. And that was actually, the whole build-up to him meeting Count Orlock, that was my favorite part of the film, because I really felt like there were a lot of cool things there that like could have been explored more, such as the gypsies themselves, and like they just felt like, they, in other versions I haven't really seen the gypsies and such as really well-rounded characters. Like, I remember them being in the book a lot more than they had, or the Dracula book, a lot more than they've been in any of the movie versions. And that's something that I was really interested in this movie, because I was like, this makes me want to learn more about, like, these gypsies at this time period and this location. Like, this makes me want to learn more about them and, like, what they were like and what their daily lives were like. And because it really made me think, like, they've got to live just a couple of minutes away from Dracula all the time. Like, that's their lives. And, what would that be like? Like, because, like, the whole story with, like, Dracula coming to London, or coming, in this situation, coming to Germany, it's like, oh, he comes there and he spreads his evil and his disease, and it's like a metaphor for the plague. But you don't see that really in the gypsy town. In the gypsy town, it's like these people have learned to kind of like live next to Dracula, and you just think about what a cool story that would have been, to explore like this little village and the people living there, and like them having to deal with Dracula. Because I've seen before in like Hammer versions, like those villagers, those townspeople, like they especially in Scars of Dracula, they're like, fuck this shit, we're gonna get together and storm the castle, and like and the only thing that's defending Dracula from all these villagers is this fucking weakling Igor guy who gets, tortured by Dracula if he does one wrong thing. And it's like, so that's what I was really, really interested in, was the build-up in this movie to the traditional story that we see over and over and over and over again. And that was really the disappointing part of this movie, was that it didn't want to stray away from that original story, that the story of Dracula, Nosferatu. There was no departure throughout the rest of the movie, basically, that really felt like, wow, Robert really took a chance here, or he really tried something new. It just, the whole thing felt like been there, done that. And that's an easy thing for me to say, because I've seen all these versions of Dracula, and that's kind of the unfortunate part, is that a lot of people haven't. So they'll see this movie and think that this is the first time it's been done before, or think that this is like groundbreaking, when really everything in this movie has been done before, and actually done better as well. I mean, let's talk about the characters, because there's a little cast of characters here. I really loved Nicholas Hoult. He's a great actor, and I've said that over and over again. Like, that's what I say about him in every single like video that I do where I review his movies. Like, he's really good. He's really underrated, and he's a really good leading man as well. I don't know why I said that so weird. I was like, he's a really good leading man. But he's really, really good in this movie. But he doesn't really get that much screen time throughout the movie. It's just like with Bram Stoker's Dracula, where he's very much like the protagonist at first, and then he just kind of disappears throughout the rest of the movie, and then he's kind of there here and there when it comes to the ending part, like the third act. But like, his character was really underutilized in this movie. And let's talk about Count Orlock himself, aka Count Dracula. They really they did a good job with marketing this movie, because they did not want people to see what Dracula was going to look like. They did not want people to be spoiled of like, oh, this is what we're going to do with this character. They wanted people to be surprised the first time that they see the character. They wanted people to be really freaked out And honestly, when I first saw this interpretation of Dracula, I was like, oh no. Like that's like the first words that came out of my mouth was like, oh no. Because I thought, of all the things you could have done with this character, you chose to give him a weird, like, and that's a big issue with this movie, is that even after he's introduced, they continue to not show him very much. They continue to just show, like, part of his face, or like a flash of his face, or a close-up of his eyes. They hardly ever show him in full light and full detail. And I bet a lot of people would say, oh, that's because it makes it more scary. And to that, I would say, number one, this movie wasn't scary at all. And that was another big issue that I had, was this movie had, like, jump scares in it. I don't know why Robert Eggers would put jump scares in a Nosferatu movie. I mean, that's just really bad. That was not a welcome addition to these movies. The others didn't need jump scares. You know, the silent movie, there's no jump scare in the fucking silent movie. But, you know, since it's 2024, we gotta have jump scares. And the movie actually opens with a jump scare. It opens with this stupid nightmare sequence that ends with a jump scare. You know, that's what they thought would be really good with the Nosferatu in 2024, was, let's add jump scares into the mix. Because jump scares are so good, and horror fans love those. But they hardly ever show him, and to me, I think it's because the design was trash. This design that they came up with, it looks terrible. It's awful. I hate it with a passion. It's so bad. It's not scary at all. It looks like a cartoon character. And the only time that they show it in really full detail is the very end of the movie. And when you see it in full light and full detail, you know why they didn't show it the whole movie, because it looks terrible. And it looks so bad. It looks so over the top. It doesn't look interesting or new or different. It just looks stupid. It just looks really, really, really weird, and not weird in a good way. I mean, I think even like Bram Stoker's Dracula looked better than this Dracula physically. This was a terrible, terrible design for Dracula. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate everything about it. And I think what's even worse is the fact that Bill Skarsgard, who's playing Nosferatu, aka Count Orlock, he's doing a really good job acting, despite this terrible costume. He's doing a really fantastic job. And he's giving, like, the performance of his life. He's putting every ounce of his person into this character. And he's in this terrible, stupid look where he has a big mustache. And and you know what's the funniest thing? The first time that I saw this new design for Nosferatu, you know what I thought he looked like? I thought he looked like his brother, I believe, Alexander Skarsgård. I thought that looked like, I thought that Bill was playing this character, but no, he looks exactly like Alexander Skarsgård. And like, another really weird thing about this character is that he's naked for, like, the whole movie. He's either naked or he's got this big coat on. And that's another strange choice, is why is he naked all the time? It's just so weird and so stupid. And it drives me insane. How, just what was the thinking there? What was the logic and the reasoning of, like, you have this creepy character, and it's like a cheap way to try to make him scary. It's like, oh, he's naked, and so you can see his creepy, disgusting, skeletal figure. It's like, it just came off as stupid. It came off as cheap and phony and theatrical, and just, I hated it. I hated the look of Nosferatu in this movie. I hated it. Now let's talk about the other characters. Lily Rose Depp, I thought was okay. She was pretty good. I mean, half the movie she was doing kind of like a Reagan from The Exorcist impression. And then I really liked Aaron Taylor Johnson in this movie. I thought that he was actually so much better than I've really ever seen him before, which was funny because in Craven, I think I said he's a terrible actor. Well, I totally take that back after seeing this movie. And then I really liked Willem Dafoe. I thought that he did a pretty good job. I thought, though, one of my favorites of the movie was actually the other doctor, the guy who was in The Witch, who was the father. You know, he's a really good actor. He's one of those actors where you just see him and you're like, yeah, I know that this is going to be a good movie because we get to see him acting in it. And, but yeah, through the rest of the movie, it was really, really lame because it just followed all the same footsteps of the other Dracula, the other Nosferatus. It didn't feel like Robert Eggers had anything new or interesting to bring to the table. And the way that the movie ended was a terribly shot, supposed like sex scene / like a biting scene where it was shot in such a way to where I couldn't even tell. I had to look at the Wikipedia. I couldn't even tell that Orlock was having sex with her, and we all know why that is. And that's the way that the movie ended. So it was like the biggest fuck you. It was like, we're going to end this movie with a terrible modern filmmaking sex scene where Orlock is like, and they shoot it in such a weird way to where, you know, earlier in the movie, Thomas, like, I don't know, he has some sort of a, I don't know, he has some sort of like a horny rage, and he just starts, you know, effing his wife while she's possessed by Orlock or something, and it's shot in such a way to where it's really disgusting and gross and creepy and just really like unsettling. But then the ending of the movie where she's letting Orlock basically rape her and then drink her blood, it's shot in such a way to where they almost make it look more beautiful than when she's having sex with her husband. They shoot it in such a way to where, like, they show the shot of Orlock and he's like staring into the camera, and then they cut to him and he's naked already and he's on top of her. And it's like, it's so weird. It's such a weird choice to do that, to make this scene look so beautiful on purpose and to make it look like something almost like holy, like religious. Like it was so weird and creepy and depressing. And that's the other thing about this movie, is that the whole movie, I was about to fall asleep by the end of the movie because this movie was really overly long, drawn out. But by the end of the movie, I was totally depressed because the way that they did the end of the movie, you really felt bad for Thomas, aka Jonathan, because it's like he didn't have any idea of anything throughout the whole movie. You know, like he starts off the movie and he's basically forced to go meet with Count Orlock so that he can get more money to help with buying a home for himself and his wife, like buying a proper home. And, you know, he's basically forced into doing that, even though he doesn't want to. And then he goes there and he's just completely fucked up by the gypsies. And then the gypsies, send him off to see Count Orlock, and Count Orlock fucks him up too. And then he jumps out of the castle, and then he's taken back to Germany, and he gets kicked out of his friend's house because his friend is turns into a douchebag. And then his wife is like having dreams about like Orlock, and she's really like in love with him, and she's like almost like possessed by him or something, or a demon or something. And then at the end of the movie, everyone but him knows that she's going to sacrifice herself and that he's basically not going to get to be with her anymore. And it's like, God, like, they really, like, just said fuck you to Nicholas Hoult in this movie. You know, like, he just completely got fucked over in this movie. And that ending, it was so depressing. And it was so, such a letdown by the end, because you think this whole movie was all for this. It was also, basically, I feel like it's like a role play movie. It's like an aesthetic movie. It's all style over substance. It's like, what if you saw Martin Scorsese's version of Dracula? Oh, what if you saw Paul Thomas Anderson's version of Dracula without adding anything new to the table? It's basically just like a what if movie. What if we got to see Robert Eggers' Nosferatu? Well, we found out, and it's not very good. I was not a fan of this movie. I'm not going to be tricked by how... I will say it was very well shot. It was very well shot. It wasn't as well shot as the other two versions, but it was very well shot. And the color grading was interesting because it had a very gothic look to it. I really liked the gothic color grading. That was something that I was surprised by, because at first I was kind of like, oh, is this movie going to be too dark for me to see what's going on? But it wasn't. And I thought that the acting was really good. But my biggest problems with the movie were how Nosferatu looked, and just the fact that the movie really didn't have anything new to say. It didn't have any... There was nothing. There was nothing. And it's like, how could you objectively say that this was a great movie? That this was a great, like, retelling of Nosferatu, when they're like, you know what, we're not going to add anything new. We're just going to completely copy and paste and basically just make it look really pretty and add all of this style and flair over it, and you guys are going to love it because you love aesthetics. You don't love story, you don't love substance, you love aesthetic. You love the Robert Eggers aesthetic. You love the gothic aesthetic. You love the characters, like, oh, look, we get to see Willem Dafoe dressed up as Van Helsing character. We get to see Lily Rose Depp with this bonnet on her head, and we get to see Nicholas Hoult as Jonathan Harker, and we get to see all these different people as these characters, and it's like, that's what really this movie was about. It was like the perfect movie for Letterboxd fans and for Twitter fans, Twitter film fans. And it was the same thing with The Substance, which I will say, this movie was better than The Substance because it didn't have any agendas, and because the acting was better. I mean that's another thing too. At least Nosferatu talked the whole movie. Like, I really loved it. Whenever Nosferatu started talking, I was really, really just like in awe of like Bill Skarsgård's acting. But anyways, I guess you could say I was kind of disappointed by this movie, because I just thought, like, is there going to be something new that they're going to bring to the table? Are they just doing this for the sake of doing it? And unfortunately, they did just do this for the sake of doing it. It was very, very much by the books. I didn't really and I know a lot of people have said, like, this movie is so depraved, and it's disgusting, and it's so gross and scary, and it's like, grow up. Honestly, like, this movie was so over the top, and it was so overly theatrical. It was really, really hard to take any of it seriously in terms of being grossed out by anything. You know, like, especially when it came to Orlock and his, like, full frontal shots, like the part where Jonathan Harker is trying to kill him, and then he stands up in his coffin, and you see his vampire ding-a-ling, and it's like, that is not scary at all. It's not creepy. It's not unsettling. And it kind of surprised me because I thought maybe Robert Eggers would be able to at least make like a scary version of Nosferatu. But surprisingly, it was very mainstream, and it was very cartoony, and it was very by the books. But overall, I wouldn't recommend this movie at all. I would recommend the original two versions. I haven't seen Shadow the Vampire. I'm actually really curious to see that, where Willem Dafoe actually plays Count Orlock, aka the actor. I can't remember the actor's name. That's kind of like a sad thing. Like, I should be able to remember his name, but yeah, I would recommend the original two Nosferatus. I would also say I would watch all of the Hammer Draculas before I would watch this again. It's really tough to say whether or not this was better than Bram Stoker's Dracula now that I think about it, because I think that at least... No, I don't know. It's really hard. You know, this is the same type of movie, though, as Bram Stoker's Dracula, where it's all style, no substance. And it's all like this fancy dressing and role-playing, and like, look at how well we did the sets, and look at how well we, did the cinematography. Like, oh, did you see that shot of the forest with the guy walking through the forest? And it's like, tell me a good story with good characters. Like, stop just telling the same story over and over again. Like, I feel bad that I'm criticizing this movie, because this is the last movie of 2024 for me. But it's just the fact that I was really hoping that for the 2-hour runtime for this movie, that there would be something new in it for me. That there would be something where I could say, like, wow, Robert Eggers did this, whereas the other two versions didn't. But instead, I could point to every single element of the other two versions, and I would say that they did them all better. Like, a lot of the people have said, like, Lily Rose Depp's performance in this movie was Oscar-worthy. I thought the performance of the original, was her name Mina? I can't remember. In the Werner Herzog movie, I thought that the actress's performance in that was a lot better than Lily's. So, like, even then, I can't really give the edge to, like, the new version. So that's really the disappointing thing for me, is that looking at all these three adaptations of Dracula, basically, I can't say that this version did anything better than those two. So in terms of food, I would give this movie jar spaghetti with no beef, no butter, and no Parmesan cheese. This is like, what if I had to eat something and I had a jar of spaghetti sauce and that was all I had. And so then you have the jar spaghetti and you're just like, yeah, I'm having spaghetti tonight. But it's like, this isn't the best it could be. And it's like something that you've had before but had a lot better over and over again. And that's really what I felt like with this movie, was that I've seen this movie done before and done a lot better. And yeah, I don't think that there's anything else I have to say about this movie. I think that I was mean to it enough, but like, yeah. And it's super surprising too, because you'd think that with this movie that I would have really liked it, but I did not. I thought that it was so mediocre and it was so been there, done that. So please like this video and comment and tell me what you thought about the movie. And then please subscribe to our channel if you'd like to see more honest movie reviews. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.